6 people left.
Do you remember Despy and
Yeah, but all
he
the,
was one of the first presidents? Matthias,
who was Spearson? You had Conrad Spearson, you had Metalis, you had Kitty Aziz,
that's it.
Andy.
Andy was the first president.
Yes,
Andy
yes,
was the first president.
yes. We're talking about ancient, our history of San Ignacio, so.
Yes.
Well, you know, the application is that it was a lot of people who came together. And what it was a need for this local area. Because before that, my YouTube's on.
Like I said,
Well, you know,
isn't it?
the application is that the problem is that it was a need at that time, and a lot of people, because think about everyone here has most people here at St. Ignacio has some roots. St. James Chicago, Cathedral, Holy Trinity, Assumption, St. John the Baptist. Most came from somewhere. Because if you're starting in the early 70s, you already had churches that were already 50 years old plus. So when they're coming out here, you know, they already had a background, and so it was more out of necessity because especially in the attitude of Mount Prospect, Arlington Heights area, when people were moving out here and it was just really blossoming. And then naturally the expansion of Woodfield and Gulf Road and those areas. I mean, when you hear, I love hearing the story, especially when we first started, that in the 70s, there were farms all around here. The homes were just starting, and so when the church was established, and that's why the church, when they first started, was they were able to use Rolling Meadows High School. They would be in the band room to do the liturgies. They would use driver's ed and other classrooms for a Sunday school and any little discussion meetings. And then when they got to this parcel over here, there was someone who actually lived on the bottom part of this first, and then they started up top with the old house church that we had. And then the one thing that I always bring up about the remarkable beauty about our church's history is I always point out, I'm like, do you know what it is to be establishing a church in the early 70s? I mean, you have cathedrals of churches with much history, let alone to want to start. That's one. Two, to start a church in the 70s. Mind you, we understand that was during, obviously, the end of Vietnam, and you're in a world where our world is not in the greatest shape. And for you to establish a church, a community together, it is not off the backs of like a influx of Greeks from Greece post World War I or World War II, where it's the great immigration, whatever. They were families who decided they want to come together to establish a community in this local area because there wasn't. St. Sophia starts, I think, a couple years after us. And then the other community, Ascension's brand new, it's only 25 years old. So there was nothing out here. Elmhurst isn't that much older. I think Elmhurst is only about 5 or 6 years older than us. Yeah. So when you put these kind of all in context, like, wow, then going back to the vote for the name, they're like, typical. They think of Demetrius, Georges, and that 9 of those were immediately kaboshed. The argument was over Sophia, or then someone brought up, or then I forgot. I got it.
It is just an Ontario.
100%. I don't know. I know.
They went to Egna and then they got.
Correct. I know some of them, but yeah. So then they had one person who brought up the name of Nectarios, and this is the first church in in North America that is named and given after Saint Nectarios. So
I didn't know Saint Darius.
Well, mind you, he was canonized 64?
Something like that.
So no, yes, yeah. He died 20. We just did the 100th anniversary, 23. So 1923, 120, okay, 20 or 22, I'm sorry, somewhere there. And he wasn't canonized until like 40 years later. And around the canonization of his sainthood, he was also then given asked of forgiveness from the Patriarchate of Alexandria for the shaming that they did upon him from obviously his metropolitan of Pentapolis. So you're right, you're talking about about 10 years, give or take. And when they went, then a few people went to the island of Egina, and then they heard about the saint, and that being brand new. You knew that the hierarchy, both of the archdiocese and of local diocese Chicago, would be keen to give a new church for a new name. Yeah. Why? We're just like the Antiochians. If you go to any, and what the Antiochians are, they're Arab Orthodox. All their churches are St. George, Dormition, Assumption, right? Mary. It's always about those. You don't hear of like random saints. And they have a lot of saints in the Antiochian church. I mean, just like us, they could use Saint Isaac the Syrian, Saint John of Damascus. I mean, these are big saints, but those are the most prominent ones. Plus, they were obviously in their focus about the ethnicity of being Arabic culturally. So culturally, Arabs, Muslim and Orthodox have such a high regard for Saint George, and then naturally we as the Theotokos, but Mary, as they understand both in the Quran and stuff like that. So it's so unique when you see how it came to peace. But there's so much more that I'm looking forward to the excavation of the history of our church. It's like a time capsule. We're telling people to be giving us some pictures and all these things because we're going to be having slideshows, and we're going to be breaking the slideshows into groups. So like one big slideshow is going to be like about Greek Fest, because there's so many pictures of Greek Fest. We're going to have slideshows just about the schools, Sunday school, Greek school, and even those Monday schools, obviously about 10 years old now. And then for the ministries, for the Philoptochos, for our church services, and we're going to break it up to the big impact moments, the establishing of the church, the opening of the doors of the church, the consecration of the church, and then obviously the big celebration. So I'm really looking forward to all the planning for next year, because it's really going to be a high point in our history, and hopefully from there, it's not the peak, it's a beautiful peak that will allow us to want to grow for the next 50 years. So we got to kind of think towards that. It's not that, we're set. There's no set, because Christianity or Orthodoxy is you live it. So it doesn't end there. It's how do we establish it to grow more. So, okay. So I'm first of all thankful to see all of you here. Christos Anesti, Christ is risen, truly is risen. We were on a big pause, literally. So we concluded towards the end of February, and then we went into our Lenten lecture series. Biasly on my end, I think this year it was probably our most diverse and, my opinion, well-rounded lecture series that we've had since I've been here for 5 years. We had six different speakers, and I explicitly made that a point. Even when I told Elder Father Chris, I said, I think they hear enough of us. We really got to get some other people to come and speak. He was laughing about it, but he understood. And we were able to get 6 wonderful different people, different topics with different needs and different focuses about our spirituality and our faith that I think really hit home in many aspects. And plus, they were in various forms, lecture format, dialogue, monologue, everything. And it was really, I think we all gained a lot. And I think a lot of you were also excited to see different faces that maybe we haven't seen in a while. Father Jim Gordon, Deacon Basilio Smith, Dr. Rhonda Anderson, Randa. I would say Rhonda, it's Randa for English. And she's Antiochian too. I did not know that. So that was unique. And other ones, Dr. Helen Peteropoulos came too. So we really had some wonderful speakers, and we really gained a lot from it as well too. But that was Lenten lecture series, Pascha, Holy Week, that beautiful intensity. And then, now we try to put everything back in order while everything else is finishing up for the semester. And it's just been kind of a whirlwind. And then we had other things that were happening on Wednesdays or other activities. So now that we've gotten together, we're able to my goal is by the beginning of June, when we'll conclude our evening Bibles, our evening adult spiritual enrichment, we're going to conclude the last chapter and a half of this book. So this book, for any of our new friends, anyone that's been on, it's about Saint Ignatius's readings for mind and heart. And it's broken up into sermons that Saint Ignatius has offered from his times throughout the late 19th going into the early 20th century. And it shows to his scholarly attitude, but I think what blew us away from our first couple chapters that we read is his application of not only pro-ethical Orthodox Christian attitude dealing with the genders, male and female, because he was speaking to a women's school, but as well as on how to teach and how to live in a Christian life with God. And it was really moving, because what was so funny that I couldn't get over was that I couldn't separate 1893 to 2023. There were so many attitudes that were saying, like, this can be applied today. He was speaking to an all-girls school. He was speaking to a different school. He was speaking to the Rosario school that he was obviously the director and one of the main professors there after obviously the situation that happened in Egypt and Alexandria or Pentapolis. And so then we now get to see this in these beautiful writings that have been translated for us to understand and study Saint Ignatius's beautiful words and his wisdom that he received from God, from our Lord. Being that it's mid-Pentecost today is also the feast of the wisdom of God. That means traditionally, the great church of Christ, Hagia Sophia, which is in Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, as well as the Hagia Sophia in Thessaloniki, which is a miniature, not much miniature, so pretty good. Has anyone been there?
We get married.
That
there.
you got married there? I love, it's such a, yeah, the one in Thessalonica?
That church is older than one in.
It's underground. You have to walk down.
But the one in Thessalonica is older than the one.
Oh, I don't know.
Because.
There's no way.
Because the one in Istanbul was built in 526.
Are you positive?
Yeah, because the original Saint Sophia burned down. You know, the cathedral church in Istanbul was Saint Irene's. And then.
That's
Saint
correct,
Sophia-
that I know.
And Saint Sophia was a smaller church and it burned down. And when it burned down, they built it. bigger.
Oh, I don't know now. You got me. Let's look.
But I'm pretty sure, I thought that the church in Saint Sophia in Thessalonica is from.
If it predates, that's pretty cool.
Is from the 5th century.
No. Listen, hold on. Hold on. Let's go what he says. Is the Hagia Sophia? Oh, they can't see. Sorry, friends. I'm not trying to omit you. We love you. I'm gonna screen share. We're all together. Don't worry. I love you. Okay, so the Hagia Sophia is a church. The three-nave basilica was built in the 7th century, and the foundations of a church dating back to 315. So it actually came after Hagia Sophia and Istanbul, but it was built on the because I was told even when I visited that it had a composition that was like the one in Istanbul, not to the grandeur, especially with the additional coves. But it had it to the size.
They don't look, they don't look that much
Well,
alike.
7th century is before they
You know,
split.
the one in this.
That has nothing to do with
is
that.
just
I mean,
huge.
that was before.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to do with what we're talking about.
The one in Istanbul is just huge, and the one.
I mean, who's visited? Who's visited Constantinople? I have. It's probably. I would have to say that. It has to be, and not only is it one of the, if not the greatest wonders of the world.
I think so.
When
It
you walk in there, you then feel how when the Slavs came, remember it was in the 8th or 9th century to learn about the faith.
Yeah.
And then when they came in and they felt like they were in heaven, you truly believe it. I saw before they just returned it into a mosque. It was a museum, and at that time, this was 2013. They were really enhancing the museum attitude. So you saw them like really taking off the stucco to really show all these and that's why we were like one of the first ones to see the sides of the mosaics of the hierarchs that they had. And it was mind-boggling. It was mind-boggling because my brain, when you're in there, is not only the architecture, it was the effort, which almost bankrupted the empire, which we know,
Yes.
and killed many people to do. When you think about how it was done to where it is today and how it has lasted, and my favorite meme that I see like on social media, whatever, is they will show one picture of ancient roads of like Rome and Greece, like the Ethniki Odo, like the national road. That the one from I think from Istanbul goes all the way through Thessalonica, Europe,
Yes.
into I don't know where that is. I forgot. Does it go all the way to Rome?
Dacian coast, it's on the Dalmatian coast.
Yes.
where it ends.
Goes all the way straight through. You can technically follow it, right? And then they'll show that road, and that was built thousands of years ago. Yes. And then they'll have it in one picture, and then they'll have a picture of like a modern day road, and we have to re-scrape it every couple of years. And we can't ever drive on it. And I always laugh when I think about that because you think about the awe that is of Hagia Sophia, and you're like, wow, it takes your breath away to think of how it's built, to think of the dome. You know, I get it because I see churches struggle now with technology to the nth degree.
It's stunning to me.
So then when you're trying to do applications of 21st century to 5th, 6th century, like we're talking about, to see them to establish this and to build it. And not only that, even Hagia Irini, which is the holy peace, right? of Constantinople, which is large in its grandeur too. It's
minuscule compared to it.
Yeah, but it's the architecture alone of what these people try to, same thing with the ancients, same thing with the Egyptians, same thing with Mesopotamia, same with the ancient Greeks. How they were able to build and do what they did, it is breathtaking. Like there are no words. I am in awe, and that's how I felt when I went to Hagia Sophia. You're in, and you're simply in awe. You're in awe of the mosaics. You're in awe of the minds that they had of wisdom, of mathematics and architecture to know the proper coves, to the proper perpendicular angles, everything else. It's profound.
Yeah.
And every aspect, every inch of it had a meticulousness. So even like how the royal doors, remember that the church, the doors in front of the altar are called the beautiful gates, symbolizing heaven. The doors that are by the narthex are technically the royal doors. That's only for royalty that was supposed to go through. We've changed that obviously because there's no defined royalty anymore. But that was only for the emperor, the empress, or where it was at that time. And I think about that because then it reminds me of like why they then built the synthronon in the back of the altar. And you can still see the synthronon in the back of Hagia Sophia, because that's where the hierarchs would stand, while the emperor would be outside among the people, but to the right as a great sign of dignitary. Profound. Every aspect of it. Where the placement of the ambona, the pulpit was, so that they can then preach the word, to exclaim the word, and then to educate the word. Then the second level. I mean, you look at it, you're like, each thing is more mesmerizing than before. And then you go to the advancements of like the mosaics, the iconography. Wow. I look at the Platitara, the Panagia, and it has like it goes back to what they said, like you felt like you saw heaven because you're looking at it, and it has a simplicity to it. It's not too large, it's not small. It just strikes when you look at her and she's holding Christ on the throne, right? And hers, I think the Hagia Sophia, I want to look it up real quick. I think right in English, Hagia Sophia, Virgin Mary, the child. Oh. I want to show it to you because, yeah, look at this. It's
Like ours.
see, no, that's not like ours, none whatsoever. It's blue.
Oh.
It's blue, and how she's sitting, Christ is larger. And you look at this one, you can look at the theology that they were able to do when this was placed on in the mosaic. Now, mind you, this is during times of iconoclasm too, right? I mean, this was placed, I think if I remember correctly, it has to be after iconoclasm. So you're talking about 9th century, 10th century, after the iconoclastic attitudes. And you look at this. This literally is like it's a proper representation of the size. It is not like some are, because the Platitera is defined as more spacious than the heavens. So it's supposed to be enormous because it's showing that what was defining that what God was, that he can never be confined into any physical, mental, or spiritual form, was confined in the aspect of from the virginal birth from the Theotokos. That's where it's like why it says more spacious than the heavens. Why? Because if he created the heavens, what can contain the heavens? It shows the Virgin Mary. But look at this. It has this very much a beauty and a simplicity to it. So I always look into this and I'm like, wow. I hope whether we can in the near future or in some way to go on a pilgrimage. Now, naturally, I want to go to the Holy Lands. I've not been there myself, but to have the opportunity to go see that, we would really be blessed to see that and witness it, because it's the only problem now is as it is a mosque, they have not fully, but they put a type of curtains. So it's like you can see, but you can't see as clear as you used to. So it's almost like we want to receive the notoriety of a museum, but it's the stamp reminding, I think, Christianity and the world that this is ours and we are a Muslim nation. So therefore it'll still be our place of worship. And I think you can define it as the saltiness to us. I think it's more of the reality to us, where then if people feel that Turkey's a secular state, that's not true. When I went there, you couldn't prove me any other way to define it as a secular state. other than the Bosphorus area, which is like the Gold Coast, really, it's like all rich, they're all driving Bentleys and nice things. Everyone else is wearing the whole burqas.
But not the Turks.
Huh?
The Turks, they used not to wear it.
Well, that's what I'm implying. That's what I'm saying. When with Ataturk and back then with the whole revolution that they had and stuff like that, after the Ottoman Empire and stuff like that, whether it's with Erdogan or whatever, it is not a secular state. You can't prove. You can tell me whatever you want. You can show me. I don't believe it. I see it truly as a Muslim state because of the connection with not only the Muslim faith, but the exploitation. I mean, you see their mosques and everything else, and then obviously the indicative attitude of the changing back of Hagia Sophia and the suppression of Christianity. It is extremely evident. Where you're going to Dubai, you're going to Qatar, and they're allowing them to actually build churches now. You know what I'm saying?
Now.
Yeah, okay, but they define themselves as a modernist, secular. I'm not talking 30 years ago, maybe you, I'm talking now.
Yeah.
But now
yes.
it is not a secular state. It is a religious state. Whether they want to pull Greece as like, being Orthodox, I think, sadly, Greece has gone into the avenue that even though they work with the church and they're still part of the Kratos and they're still paying the pensions or whatever, it's not that hand in hand anymore. I don't believe it either in Greece as well too. You see the secularization and now naturally the church. Now, I can't say that if it was together, that it'd be the best bet. So I'm not implying that either regarding politics. I can't answer that. But you see Russia's hand in hand with its country and state. We see that the Russian Orthodox Church is the church, right? That is the faith. And you see the suppression of other faiths as well too. To each their own, you know what I mean? But there's no black and white, clear cut definition of either one. So when they state it, I think they're just stating it to whoever they want to appease at that moment, whether appeasing Muslims or they're appeasing seculars. It's a mosque.
It's a mosque, it's not a museum.
It's been a mosque now for like 4 years.
Isn't this?
Yeah, I went in 2019 and 2019 was the last year you could go there.
Before it became a mosque.
And they turned into a mosque 6 months after it.
Yeah,
So
and the proportions of the mosque might not have changed much. Also, really, all that did those, whatever beauty was taking off from the preservation from the museum status is now being hidden by shades and drapes.
Oh,
Yeah, because they have to have them covered, right? You're not supposed to have, if you ever go to a mosque, there's no images. That's why you see those big circles that have the written, of either the Quran or of the word of Muhammad. No,
but
there's
they
no,
believe to take out churches to turn it to a mosque, that's in the religion.
well, that's part of their. that's
Because we
what it
have
is.
the round church in Thessaloniki, Rotonda,
Mhm.
they took over because they believe if they want a mosque to take, well, when the empire was there, the Muslims, to turn it.
Let me ask you a question. I'll tell you a very honest question. If hypothetical orthodoxy became bigger than Islam, and we converted all these Muslims, are you gonna create new churches or are you gonna use their mosque and make them into churches?
Oh, we don't do that.
Why not?
We didn't do it in the Thessaloniki.
Sure you did.
Only the ones that they were churches before.
Okay, but that's how they work. So now, if for instance, if I had a Jami and I wanted to, you're either gonna look at a misis, you're gonna take it down and build a brand new church, or I've seen places that have gone into them, recreate it into a church and then pray there.
The Parthenon was a Greek church, was an Orthodox church.
It was a pagan temple, first of all.
Yeah.
We always forget about that.
Look at their church, the
Yes, go ahead.
So they have been for everything. And he took it upon himself to become a preacher and to rebuild, all those paintbrush and all those things.
Right.
I wish I could see them. I don't know if we can put those ever, but isn't this the same situation that he found himself in? Everything had been destroyed, and then he was essentially helping to rebuild after Greece got itself back.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, and now mind you, his attitude from, obviously from Greece, from being young is, most of his real growth happened. Well, you gotta remember, St. Ignatius was born in Asia Minor, right? He was born in, God, what was it called? Not, Silibria,
Yes.
right? That's what we call the son of Silibria, okay? Right, and that's right outside of Constantinople, so it's farther into that manner. And they even have to this day, they have this childhood home, and it says of Nectarios of Pentapoulos. It's pretty unique in Turkish. Surprised they exploit that, but naturally they do. And that's in Silibria. And then from there, obviously with his travels, but remember, most of his time was either done in Egypt, right? Much of his education, plus obviously his pastoralship, and then obviously when he returned back to when he went to Greece, almost in a sense of exile. Now, Greece, yeah, you're right. Mine was post-war, post-independence, but you're talking about Greece, even in post-independence. You know, I try to tell people, you know, Jim knows, especially with history, there was never any peace. Because then it was, remember, the only thing that was free first was like the Peloponnese, then they get Attiki, and then from Attiki, they had to go north, and they get to Yanina, and then they go to Macedonia, then you got the Balkan War. So realistically, it was forms of things to then
Little
go.
by little.
And my thing is, it goes back to I think to the scripture where we're hearing of, you know, the people who are in darkness saw a light. I think that's really what Christians probably felt like being under the Ottoman rule for, what was it, 400 years plus, right? And so, and mind you, we are the beneficiaries now, 200 years later, of the Krifos of peasant farmers, uneducated people who somehow kept something of the faith. And yet, you know, we have worse issues, like you said, where instead of us being zealous spiritually in a manner to want to enhance these pamphlets or look into the studies of these saints and remarkable people, we just kind of put it to the side. We are doing the opposite of what Christ told us to do as we are the light of the world. And instead of us putting us to the top, we hide it under a bushel, we cover it, and then we only use it whenever we need it.
Well, do you remember in the movie Man of God, there was a dialogue between Saint Nectarios and the head of the school that he was at? You know, where the head of the school, you know, basically told him, he says, I want a Greece that, you know, throws the old church things away. You know, he wanted a modern European Greece, you know, and, but over time, he came to respect Saint Nectarios, you know, and respect, you know, what he taught.
Right.
My father sort of grew up in that kind of era too, and he had similar attitude,
Against the church?
against the church when he was young, but as he grew older, you know, he,
I think the
he
question,
became more in tune with it.
well, I guess we have to ask ourselves, because it also applies to our book and going to what we were talking about is, I think you have to see what were the people getting out of the church? What were the people getting out of church during that time? The church, first of all, the establishments of schools, and enhanced ministry features, philanthropia, catechist schools, and all those things were non-existent to extreme infancy, or they weren't prevalent. They're only in like certain areas. So then that's why they would have many of the attitudes they had where, you know, if they, and then you get the attitude of the educated. Remember when he went to the school? I remember he kind of mocked Nectarios and like condemned, like, you know, he doesn't think he's smart. And like, who are you going to say or whatever? And he was a more educated person. Or then later on we see in the movie that he asked for repentance, forgiveness and stuff like that. You know, and that's a very common adage. I mean, that's actually not changing into modern day. Most people think that the priesthood is it's a simplicity or a formality. That it's just someone who likes doing church stuff, who likes to be at the church. And, you know, if you were to tell them that you have a master of divinity, you know, to them, that's like, you know, you went to the DeVry Institute and you just have some sort of a degree and big whoop. I mean, I'm not a doctor, right? I did not have that schooling. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not this and that. So, and I think the problem with that evidence is it shows in the respect of the profession of the priesthood, not the dedication. Because I get people come up to me, kiss my hand left and right. They're respecting the priesthood sacrament there. But they are not, many Christians do not respect the profession of the priesthood for the many talents, hats, and efforts that they need to place upon their head. And you can kind of see that where if you talk to my predecessors, especially the older priests, that was their biggest gripe. because people could not find it in their mindsets, not hearts, mindsets, the respect to want to pay a priest a true modern day salary. I mean, when you're looking at priests and they were making, 25, 30, 40 without insurance and stuff too. I mean, when our archdiocese implemented the across the board insurance, okay, and then also a type of pension program, that was miracle 1, 2 for a priest because they had none of that. And then, mind you, they were all they were being forced to go to different. I think of Father T, for example. Father T, everyone thinks about his life here. Many forget that he was in Kansas City for a while. And when he was in Kansas City while Presbytera was pregnant here. And she couldn't come down until she had the kid. But that's true. And he was telling the Archbishop, who he knew then, I think it was the Iacobus of North America, and this and that. But he's like, no, I need you to go down there. And then if you need to, we'll come bring you back up. Or whatever. He's like, I got my wife pregnant. What do you want me to do? There's souls there too. So think about it. They were at the mercy of what they had to serve and do. Plus, mind you, churches were blossoming in random parts of the country, especially off of the heels of World War II and the expansions of commerce, train, roads, everything. Where so now modern day it has affected us. Why? Hypothetical. You have 2 churches in the Quad Cities. Okay, Quad Cities we know are East Moline and Rock Island. You don't have enough Orthodox, let alone Greeks, Orthodox to sustain one. You have 2. Okay. Waterloo, Iowa. Where Waterloo, Iowa is? It's north of Des Moines. It's west of Dubuque. It is near Mason City, and there's not another thing about it. Yet there's a Greek Orthodox church, and it is named after Saint Demetrius. What do? Do you turn it into how do you turn it into a museum? Who's gonna be the curator? Who's gonna take care of it? Another problem. That's many issues. And you see that in other areas as you continue to go west. I know the metropolis of Denver has that struggle too, because Denver is such a large mass. It goes from Idaho all the way down to Texas, okay, just landmass. And a lot of those churches, especially the old ones, that to me, and I've met a few more Greeks they were in Billings, Montana, Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Or in Nevada that has 2
Greeks.
little churches where they had mines about 100 years ago, so they have.
And now
There's no priest.
Yeah. And now there's nothing, so they're just there. I mean, what do you do? So that's where it goes to the problems, because then you'll have the issue like here. Now we have this issue. It was kind of a little discussion, but we had a clergy retreat a week ago, and we were at Galena. Okay, Galena's like about 20 minutes from Dubuque. Dubuque has the church Prophet Elias. It has a lot of beautiful history to it, but there's the Dubuque city itself has gone down. When I say gone down, I mean just people have been departing and leaving. But they've gone more in Iowa, not closer to the river, naturally being closer to Illinois. So then they had a church, they had Prophet Elias, and they got to a level now where they can't pay for a priest salary, whether it's a new priest, a young priest, or that's just salary. I did not talk about plus everything else that is needed, pension, insurance, plus modern day. And now, regardless of the inflation and everything else, we're seeing this more evident in other churches, bigger, well-established churches. So the reality goes back to what we're talking about Nectarius stuff to is it's very hard. It's very hard to find the zeal of the fervor of the faith amongst clergy when it's not being reciprocated from laity to want to co-participate in this struggle to be witnesses of Christ. It's a tough environment for Christianity. I don't know of any other time, because we are defined in a postmodern world where, I think of the adage of if God were to come back, he returns, would he find or understand or recognize a true Christian? I think now it's very difficult. I'm not implying that World War II, World War I, communist rule, Ottoman rule, you name it, whatever. The problem now with postmodern is we've created our own selves as demigods. So why would I need God if I feel that I can accomplish anything that I need? And we see that sadly in the evidence of the lack of participation in a man-made church, man-made church. That's what all these buildings are to people. They're man-made. So why would I want to be confined by man-made rules? That's where the misinterpretation of a lot of stuff regarding our faith is. And now, mind you, with Nectarios and thinking of him, not only that he was zealous, and I think sometimes for us clergy, we have to be able to swallow that humble pill is even when we save one person, you know, you hear, what does it say? When one person repents, all of heaven rejoices. That's hard for us to realize because the pictures are so big, where you're going against the grain where you look at a Willow Creek that's down the street and they have thousands of people, right? And they have multiple pastors. We have TVs that show us friends like Joel Osteen or whatever, and they have an entire stadium filled with 50,000 people, listen, hanging on every word. And, you know, you're stuck here and you talk to most Greek Orthodox churches and every year they say about the same thing ever. How are we going to increase stewardship? How are we going to do this? How are we going to get people? Blah, blah, blah. And all the best part with the getting the people shows to our loss as Orthodox Christians is that it only is getting people usually by cannibalizing.
But Willow Creek people go in and then they
Well,
leave.
it's not a
You know, it's
church.
just, I
Well,
mean,
more importantly for that, but you see,
It's
the
a
problem is, how do we look at Nectarios, okay, to follow in his footsteps, to be a steadfast pillar. And I think to be like that pillar where you're gonna take on waves, but you cannot allow it to weaken you. Because you're gonna get waves, you're gonna get blows. What are the blows? The blows are gonna be the hypothetical that, this church is doing well. What am I doing wrong? Now, there's always a need for a priest, let alone every Christian, have self-reflection. That comes from our own prayer and spirituality to say, no one's perfect. So what am I doing wrong and what should I be trying to do better? That's supposed to be part of a natural Christian's life. But the problem is we look so outside always that what we do is we actually just become simply jealous and envy. Whether the other person's right or wrong, you're jealous because everyone's following them and everyone's believing them, everyone's listening to them, everyone's giving to them and stuff like that. Where for us as priests, let alone for people, we have to be on the same page about how do we bear good fruit, right? So that we're not like the fig tree that is then, chopped up, so to say, that withers away and then is thrown and then put into the fire. That's the reality of, what we have to deal with. And going with like what we were saying with Saint Nectarios, I mean, he wasn't ever called to receive notoriety. He just spoke openly with the faith and wisdom and trust in God so that people that heard him recognized him. But then you were going to take two paths. You're going to take a path of jealousy, or you're going to take a path of hope so that you recognize what he said so that you can then apply it to your own day-to-day life. And I think that's where we got to really understand what we see with Saint Nectarios, because he himself, in his own manner, as was brought up before, yeah, he was in every sense of persecution, but I'm not persecuted modern day. So how do I relate myself to Nectarios? Are any of you persecuted? You might be, or you might be oddly looked at. But we're talking about persecution here that he could have been legit. Well, he was. He was exiled by his own people first. Second, he could have been, killed or accosted many times just simply for what he's expressed. And then, even when he was exiled, obviously on the island of Egina, we then heard the other scandals that were brought against him. Attitudes with the nuns and taking on girls and blah 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 and this and that.
Yeah, but that's misinterpretation.
Isn't that most scandals something like that?
Girls to become nuns, and the parents were against him.
Yeah, I know, but but the problem is,
to be a nun is not his fault.
yeah, but if you
Like
don't,
Marina, the
hold on,
other day,
if you don't,
Marina was
yeah,
here.
if you don't want something to be done, or you don't like how something's gonna be done, aren't you gonna do everything in your power to see how to take that away or to change it?
Very confusing. And when you were describing what was going on in churches, I have a book at home I got maybe 20 years ago in Greece called Vanishing Greece.
Mm.
And it's all the churches. And this looking outward makes it solid.
Mm.
So.
Well, the worst part about the looking outward, and that's why I tell anyone I speak to a spirit with my confessions is there's not one breath that in any manner we should always look outward. You always have to start inward. You gotta start with yourself. You gotta start with the churches. What are we doing here? What am I not giving? Yeah, and the problem is You know what it is? It's, I think a lot of the stuff sadly is it's the pride, it's the ego and the vainglory. You look now, let me give you an example, so we can move forward and actually read a little bit tonight. If they're gonna promote a church in Greece, they show the Kathedraliko, which is the cathedral, right? And you see this basilica, right? Beautiful, they renovated it. And so you see all this, it's the Greek term megalia, ornate, beauty. And then if you're a simple priest and you're in a little chapel in some Poyo, and then what do they do there? They're like, well, you don't need someone that's good there. Just send some Poriati there. And then just send someone who's uneducated there. That's it. Just give them the service and call it a day. The problem is then you see that in the establishment, the organizations. You see that actually in churches too. Now, even in the United States, I don't know if you guys have realized that. You know, if there's smaller churches or medium churches, a lot of moves that they used to do with priests, it was like stepping stones. What does that mean? Okay, I'll give you the example. Myself, I come out of the school. I was placed at St. Dimitri Chicago as the assistant priest. Okay, that's like a first stepping stone. It's a big parish, and they need an assistant. So you're going to go there, you're going to learn. It's a machine and go from there. Then you're supposed to go to a small parish and start low. It's almost like a hierarchy to build up. Now, naturally, I was incredibly blessed to come here, and I'm still continuously learning and trying to grow. But yeah, I could end up. You're right. Or Hegwish. Hegwish is an assumption. 25 families.
By the train.
I mean, think about it. You think of where somebody or any other small parish, and you're going to start there. Then there's an attitude, understanding from the church that once you start small, to go to another parish is considered respectfully a type of promotion. A type of promotion. There's the officials that we receive as priests are not promotions. Just because you're a confessor, just because you're a proistamino, just because you're our stavroforio, that means you can wear a cross, just because you're a proto-presbyter, archimandrite, it's not defined as a promotion. That's just titles. The church kind of sees that when you kind of build up and go, that's where you get the promotions. And that's tough because that's how it used to be. So I could see older priests, if they see younger priests get a large parish, become very envious of them. Like, well, they didn't have to do what I had to do, or something like that. And I understand. You know what I mean? Yeah, now you see the medical field's even harder. I mean, and I talked to a lot of medical personnel, they're like, it's not the same, and it's really tough. And then plus with all the people that post-COVID, whatever they dealt with and they left, there's so many vacancies, they're taking everything and everything. The church has the same issue. I hope everyone realizes we are beyond hemorrhaging. We are now at DEFCON 5 as a church. There are no priests. And I didn't finish my point for Dubuque. So with Dubuque being so small, they only have about 25 families. I was so blown away. So I've been to the old Dubuque Prophet Elias Church. That's maybe about an hour and a half away. They had about 4 years ago a devastating, not fire. Something happened where the roof collapsed. Okay, destroyed pretty much, made their old building uninhabitable. Okay, insurance stuff, a lot of help out. There are families that are whatever. So we found a church near downtown, which is actually quite, I believe an old Lutheran church. Don't misquote me. We saw where it was. And it has like a mini campus, but it was like a nice sized church. They had a basement downstairs. They had additional offices in other areas. And now might have been thanks to the Lutheran people, whoever had it before, immaculate to impressive. I was blown away. Then they were able to convert all the stuff where they put an icon screen, they have some icons, and it was majestic in the middle of Dubuque, Iowa, where you're like, wow. And then the problem is, okay, now who's going to find the diamond in the rough to go and serve the faithful? And that's where the $1 million question is, because now we can't find people, because what happens is many of these kids, even myself and other ones out of immaturity, when you come out of the school, what happens in the school, you're looking at, you see all those big churches, because even us, when we're at the school in the seminary, when I go to, Holy Week, or if you're at the school and there's other things, they'll call seminarians to go be chanters at different churches in the Massachusetts or New England area, and you'll see big churches. Or then if you came from a big church, you're already kind of like, part of my language, spoiled, kind of like, oh, this is how it can be. You don't see the reality. It's almost kind of like, You know, that show, Secret Boss, what is that called? Hidden Boss or whatever? I forgot it. And the boss is like an employee, he's working with the employees and getting down to their level. Sadly, even us as clergy, we don't see that as well too, where I was fortunate as a seminarian, I was able to travel with His Eminence Metropolitan Iakovos of blessed memory and Bishop Demetrius Amokisos to a lot of our parishes in the metropolis of Chicago. I go chant with them and I go see them, and I saw the various people. And it really humbled me. I didn't come from a big church, and I did, but I grew up in the South Side, so it's like you had a magnet of like all these churches. I saw the Basilica of Palis, St. Constance and Helen, to where I predominantly grew up at St. Spiridon and Palis Heights, to a small parish like Holy Cross Justice, to Assumption Olympia Field, where my father is and is now Homer Glen, to see those challenges. So I saw these unique opportunities, and it brought a different light to me, because then I'm not given a mindset or a false narrative of what the priesthood is all about. So even when I come here, and I am respectfully saying this is a basilica, we have an enormous parish, we have an enormous ministries, we incredible activities, and I have to continue to remind myself to be humble and to look at the small things, because that's what I'm called to do and what Christ tells me to do. But I'm blessed like that. Sadly, I also know many of my brothers who might not see that, or not even see the own diamond of their own rough. I tell my Cubado, I have a Cubado. I don't know if he's watching. He sometimes watches some of our live streams. He's in All Saints of Peoria. His name's Father Anastasios Dideropoulos. I tell him I envy you quite often, because why? He has 125, 100, maybe 40 families. They all know each other. They have a true attitude and intimacy as a community. They recognize each other. They love each other. They help each other, and they pay his salary. He does not have the same intensity that we have up here. Intensity can be in various forms. And he still has his time with his family and everything else that he gets to really enjoy, and he has a lot of peace. I said, wow, I envy that. He goes, here, we have a lot of intensity, we have a lot of busyness. Some people say that's great. Yeah, it is. But it could also be daunting. It could be exhausting. It could be demanding. All these things. Not to me only. And that's what I'm trying. That's not a woe is me attitude. It's just an honesty, because it's a reality of what our churches are. So when I think about these readings and things that we put in Nectarios, it kind of puts a lot of stuff into perspective. Because what he's implying, 1890s, 1900s up to what we're doing now, it resonates, but sadly, I think we're worse off applying it now than probably they were 130 years ago, which is sad, because we think we're advanced. We are defined as postmodern, right? So we're in this AI technology and all these enhancements, yet the simplicity and the beauty of life we're ignoring and forgetting about. So yeah, it shows it, and we see it in our various forms, but it's the reality of our lives and everything that we participate in. So so someone had messaged me and asked me if we have other books. I do. I will get you that book personally to the one who messaged me. And if anyone else needs a book, please contact myself, whether email or communication. I can get you these books as well too. There is, it's no fee. It's a gift from our church to you. Just take it, read it, look it over. It has a lot of beauty to it, and we'll go from there. Just for a few.
Father, one question.
Yeah.
Bishop Nathaniel brought you.
Correct.
How he knew you?
He didn't.
He didn't.
No, it was, so he told me fall of 18. The only thing that came about was like, he was here, he came here March of 18. Him and Father Peter and the community talked in May of 18 that he was planning on moving Father Peter.
Removing.
Okay. July, August of 18, I asked him, because I was at St. Demetrius for 4.5 years, and I could see there was some writing on the wall, not at St. Demetrius, about what was going on with the Metropolitan. And I asked him very bluntly, I was with him, I'm like, my wife just got a new position as a full-time teacher. Should she accept it? Are we gonna move far or close? And he told me she should accept it. I said, okay. So I told her to accept it, because if we were moving far, we'll say no, because we would have to move. I'm not knowing, he didn't say anything, say, I'm gonna move you. Not, Nectarios never discussed anything else. Then he tells me in the fall, and then he introduces me at our Vespers, right? The worst part, do you remember the Sunday before your Vespers in 18? Were you here? Who was here?
Oh, I'm
he-
sure I was
He
here.
made me sub. He made me sub here. And he told me to tell everyone that I'm not coming. He said, don't tell anyone anything. I said, oh, okay. Like, you can't make this even more worse for me. So I literally subbed here because Father Peter, I think he had taken some vacation time.
No, he told him he would be out by.
No, I know that, but I'm talking about in November of 18. And I'll just never forget that Sunday because it was a beautiful liturgy, but it was probably the most awkward day in my life. Because every one of you came up to me and was asking, are you gonna be our priest? And I had to say, I don't know. I literally felt like Peter denying Christ 3 times. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the man. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Because I'm like, and yeah, it was somewhat of a lie. I did know the answer, but I mean, they told me not to because he wanted to say it at the Vespers, the feast day. But I think by then, I think people had kind of gotten some rumblings. And then obviously when it happened, it happened. But then the hard part was I wasn't actually placed in here. I didn't get my paperwork until January 15th of 19. And then obviously that's when I started my ministry here. But no, I didn't know that
He
before.
inquired about you.
What?
He looked into your life and your activity.
Well, I think
He didn't know you personally, but.
no, but I mean,
He found out.
yeah, but it wasn't like I was like the highlight. I think it was to the situation because I remember even originally he told me that because remember when I came, Deacon Nectarios was here with me. Remember that? And Father Nectarios now, Karen Tonis. And he did tell me that Father Chris Stampanos, who was our chancellor then, was going to help administratively with the church as well too. And I'm like, okay, because I didn't know what he meant from like, am I the proistamenos? What am I? And there was no clarity in that one. So I said, okay, I'll do what you tell me. And that was tough because I technically was his first move after obviously with Father Peter. I was his first placement. So I think about that one. And actually I look back in hindsight. The only thing he only told me 2 things when he was going to place me. He talked to me one-on-one. And I said, what do you want me to do there? Is there anything I need to do? And he said, first, just begin by loving the people. Okay. And then the funniest thing was by like December, people were like complaining to him, you told us he's coming. When is he coming? And then he told me, he's like, don't worry. Oh, something about like Theophanias. You're going to be doing plenty of Theophanias there in your life. And I said, oh, okay. I didn't know what that meant. That could also change. There's no guarantees on that. But I look back and I kind of chuckle because every time around January I think about it. And yes, I've done what now? 4, going into my 5th year. So yeah, but it's been a wonderful ride and just incredibly blessed because it's a very beautiful and dynamic community. So it just kind of puts things in perspective about what's going on. Yeah.
But it's a management move. He just, he was put in a new position.
Correct.
And he has to evaluate what people he wants in what places.
Right.
And he saw something in you.
You're
and,
right.
And
I don't know. And then,
what I mean?
and the thing was,
Business managers did the same thing.
right. And at that point, there weren't many assistants. Like, that's what I was saying. Like, that's when I asked him the question. I put the question first then. He never asked me, do you want to move or anything? I asked the question like nonchalant. If you are going to move me, like I said, like that, my wife was received a thing. If a full-time position, because if it's a full-time position, I mean, especially the teacher, it would be hard on her record for her to leave mid-year and then we'll say this and that or whatever. So I said, are we going, if you, I forgot, I said like, if you move me, I said, if you move me, are you gonna move me far or close? So then I know that the person's gonna take the job. And I said, what should we do? He's like, okay, you can have her take the job. And so then I kind of put my mind, but I did not, now remind you at that time too, the other church that was open was Holy Trinity. Holy Trinity had not closed yet. Park Ridge, she was teaching at Jefferson School. So she was teaching at Jefferson and she was a full-time teacher. At Park Ridge, yeah, Park Ridge. And I was, because I lived in Morton Grove, still ministering at St. Demetrius Chicago. And it was really funny. St. Demetrius Chicago had a going away party for me end of November. Christmas, people were telling me, what are you still doing here? I'll never forget those liturgies. They're like, you're still, like, they're gonna notice, like, you're still here? I'm like, I guess. I'm like, no one wants me, but I don't know if I actually have any physical ones. I'm gonna order more. So I will get them. So I'll give them to you so then we can finish the other the other times, and then I'll make sure to give it to you. All I would ask is just come by the office. Probably by Sunday, and we'll have more of them, so. All right, I just want to read for a few minutes. I'm not gonna take too much more of our time. So the page I want to walk into is page 45 of our book, and it's called On Exercise. Okay, page 45. It's called On Exercise. And excellent. So I want to read the bottom part first so we can get a little context on it. So it says these were some of his sermons offered on the 21st of August, 1893, at the opening of a new exercise club in the coastal town of Kimi, when the saint was in Irokirix. And Irokirix is a preacher. It was a preacher, right? And on the island of Evia. This sermon argues that moderate exercise is a necessary part of the formation of youth, since it properly responds to man's bodily needs, the body being one half of man's psychosomatic existence. As in the previous case, this work was originally published by the saint in 1894, and obviously they've been able to translate this, obviously from the original Greek into the English. So now we're going to read a little bit on the understanding of exercise, physical exercise, and how it's a part of our spiritual life. This is a good one. I'm looking forward to hearing some of this. Greg, would you read the first few paragraphs?
These wise words furnish the reason why moderate bodily exercise has always and by every civilized nation been considered a necessary undertaking and the inseparable attendant and companion of every free and well-formed citizen, as well as a sure mark for perfect education. Behold the reason for taking such a view of moderate exercise. Everyone knows about the consistent union between soul and body, and the influence these two have on one another on account of their referring back to one single person, to one single perceptive faculty of a single material spiritual being. That is, man who perceives each and every single movement in either soul or body as the movement of one lone being, which expresses itself through the eye. In other words, on account of this union, this or that state of either body or soul produces corresponding sensations in that one unified faculty. Therefore, when the body suffers, man says, I suffer. And he says the same whenever the soul is afflicted. The opposite is true whenever the body is sound and the soul is healthy. A painful or pleasant sensation arising out of the affliction of health of either of these two is transmitted by sympathy from the one to the other on account of the unity of the person or account of mankind.
Wow, that's some heavy stuff there. What do you guys think of that coming from a Irokirix, from a preacher? What do you think of that? No, I know it's a preacher.
Considering
Preacher.
being in a village, that would be hard for most to understand if he was in a mountain village.
Preacher. Why are you shaking your head?
The one who writes the logo.
Irokirix, not Irokirix. Irokirix means an ordained preacher.
I don't know.
Yeah.
An educated one that has the assignment.
Correct. As the defined by a metropolitan. No. Defined by a metropolitan, go places and preach.
I see.
So actually, so let's do a little history. Sorry, Nico. Keep your point, okay? And Irokirix would literally go, and he was the designated one if he served with another priest to always preach. 1, 2. Parish priests did not preach. They did not preach at every service.
Like if they could read and write. So
Bingo.
they weren't allowed.
Correct. So this Irokirix, as Nectarios, would literally be sent or to go to different places, and he would preach there. That's why I remember when he was it on Evia? This is what we were talking about. Remember when he was with the shepherds and he's like preaching to them, they're all staring at him, and it's like speaking above their head. But that's an example, because what are they used to? A priest who just does the service says, it shows to the respectfulness of the title of him being Irokirix, yet sadly, the lack of support by the hierarchy to enhance his wealth of knowledge and wisdom to speak to multitudes of people because of jealousy and envy, whether it was in Alexandria Pentapolis is metropolis, to even Greece or to wherever he was as well too, so.
About the ones who does the κήρυγμα, like 40 liters.
He's not in Neurokitics.
Αλλά έκανε το κήρυγμα
Where?
εδώ, στην εκκλησία,
In the church?
in the church. And
Then he's a philologo. What?
In Greece too, είχαμε άνθρωπο που έλεγε το κήρυγμα.
It's a philologo.
And he wasn't theological and he wasn't a priest.
Oh, these were people who had degrees.
What was his degree or his background in?
I don't
They were
know.
It has to be in some theology. So there's like a mandate in the churches too. In the churches, unless you have a theological degree or background approved by the higher, no person is allowed to preach in the church. You hear what I said? Kirigma,
Κήρυγμα.
preach, is different than speaking.
You can have lay preachers though, because they have the theological degree.
Correct, correct. They don't have to be ordained, but it has to be approved and blessed by the hierarchy of that local jurisdiction. But there's a big difference. A kirigma and a homilia are two different things. Did you hear what I just said? Kirigma and homilia are two different things. An homilia is a speech that any Yahoo can offer, and a kirigma has to be done by a prescribed theologian with some type of background and a theological background. That's 100%.
But not to be a priest.
Yeah, they don't have to be a priest.
Father Thalasinos was
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a priest. It-
before he became. a
Correct, it does
priest.
not, but it doesn't, just as Jim said, it does not have to be a priest. There are lay theologians who can speak, but there's a problem. Very simple, it's conditioning. You don't have a tab on your throat and you preach. I promise you, if the person has a tab and does it after you, he will garner 25% more attention and more respectability than the person who is a lay person. Black and white. It's a tough conditioning and it hurts because that's why our church suffers now. Because now I just said to you guys for like half an hour crying about we don't have priests. Well, I would love to support and engage our lay people to take on leadership roles. Problem is, here's the best thing. If I brought someone now, a lay person, to speak to you, you might not give them the full attention that you would to a clergyman. And you know how I also noticed this as well too? Well, look at our Lenten lecture series. Well, there were women. I'm proud of our people. Everyone was really respectful, whatever. But Nick Kazmiotis. Nick Kazmiotis spoke about IOCC. Okay, he wasn't super engaging, but compared to him, compared to the clergy ones, you saw attentiveness more so than with him. Now it could be on the person, it could be the attitude or whatever, but I'm promising you, compared to laity, to clergy, and it's simply from the ordination, we give that much thing, but there's a big, it's like playing with fire. Because then what happens? Just because you're ordained doesn't mean you're a good preacher. That's hard to swallow. We think we are, but the problem is we forget that we make mistakes as well too. Many mistakes. How we do it. What do we say? Is it correct theology? In what manner is it presented? All of that. So this is all food for thought and understanding what Idiokitics is, especially with Nectarios, who here is speaking on the unity of soul and body and the importance of nourishing the body with exercise and movement. Something important to go from there. Nico, you were saying a topic, please say what you wanted to say real quick.
I think you mentioned, the depth of what he was saying to the crowd he was speaking to at the time when he was living in Evia.
Correct. Yeah. Good point.
I mean, they seemed, simple village raised people, and I think that this would have been a little bit over their heads.
I mean, yeah. Oh, but that's why you see, right? The sermon argues that moderate on a coastal town of Kimi. Oh my gosh. Unless, yeah, I wonder why. Let's see if we could see more, if there's any other footnotes about the why he did this in what manner. So let's keep that point because I want to see what else he says in this thing as well too. Louis, do you want to read the next paragraph, number 3, on account of?
On account of this mutual influence, then, if a man is to be happy, if he is to act in a way worthy of his calling, he needs to be healthy in both fronts. Since without both being in good condition, he is unable to be happy and cannot be fit to perform the work of his calling. since there are many things which undercut the health and well-being of the soul and body, man therefore ought to take great care to fortify both, so as to keep them strong and robust. Thus they will be able to repel the innumerable assaults of enemies and to be ready and prepared to enjoy that happiness which comes from the well-being of the two parts of the self, and at the same time to be able to fulfill the work of his calling. Wherefore, as all know well, the training of exercise of both body and soul are inborn duties set upon man by both his very nature and his calling. Since a healthy body serves the soul willingly and readily, while the soul, which has cultivated its faculties, is sound, healthy, and governs the body prudently.
So two things. One, I think, to Nico, to your point is, I think when you were speaking to this coastal town, this might have been a town that actually focused very much on the body and possibly not on the soul. So maybe you're trying to imply that it's a both dual nature to support both beings, that you can't just focus on the body and not take care of your spiritual self, your soul. And secondly, doesn't this sound like Paul's letters? Like when they would ask him questions and they would ask him about marriage, life, family, husband, wife, and how to do. Doesn't this kind of sound like him giving us this understanding, and especially from a psychological background? This doesn't sound like this could be a psychology book talking about the psychosomatic understanding of a person, combining. But see, why I have a big smile about this is because on my education, I went to the University of Illinois Chicago. I had a double major psych and history. When I was studying psychology, I was trying to figure out, in my own personal opinion, how I can apply, and I wasn't a very good Christian, even thinking of how well I knew my Christianity. How can I apply Christian aspects to the study of psychology? And there are many instances that things stuck out at me that you can apply to it. But I was always just thinking about the aspect of how do I combine the soul, which I had to learn about more later in my own upbringing, as well as in my own studies in the School of Theology, to then be applied to the body and to the mind. Because they would only focus on those aspects, obviously, in the understanding that the soul is a third thought that doesn't directly apply to the psychology and to the body. Also, the psychosomatic attitude of the ego, the I, the id, and those other understandings as well too. So I always think about that. And I'm like, how can you apply them and to make them into a unified effort? But sometimes it might be the simplest manner of just training, taking care of yourself, both body, both mind, not both, but all aspects, and soul as well. So interesting. Okay, Nico, do you have your book with you? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
What could you read? Number 4. Although great care.
Although great care and concern is required in order to cultivate these two, one should not fall into extremes, and the care of the body of he who exercises ought to be especially measured. On the one hand, according to Aristotle, the extreme cultivation of the soul undermines the body through excessive strain, while on the other hand, the extreme cultivation of the body undermines the soul through unceasing exertion. The second is the greater evil, on account of it amounting to the corruption of what is more excellent. Very rightly, then, it is said that prudence is found in the mean, everything in moderation, and nothing in excess. He who is given to moderation and excess on one front, being unable to concern himself with both and ever tending away from the other front, undermines the other. Excessive concern for one is negligence of the other. Immoderate concern for the body, excessive exercise doubly damages the soul. It damages it indirectly through subsequent illness and directly through the body gaining excessive strength. The excessive strength of the body arousing out of unceasing concern for it renders it wild, difficult to manage, independently minded, bold, and unyielding in the face of the soul's dictates. The soul, having become weak, deprived of power, compromised by inactivity, gives the body boldness to rebel against the spirit and prompts it to try and completely subjugate it, to bring it under the dominion of its strength. It renders the enslaved soul an instrument by means of which the body's irrational impulses are fulfilled, corrupting it and causing whatever may be found in it that is noble to vanish. Therefore, neither the attainment of athleticism nor unrivaled muscular strength should be the aim of exercise, but rather the building of bodily strength for the sake of ready satisfaction of the demands of the spirit and the fulfillment of those duties set upon it.
So you shouldn't be bodybuilding.
The aim of exercise is not to produce athletes for the games, but rather perfectly formed men capable of any undertaking. For it is well known that exercise by means of habit renders one more ready for struggles and more industrious through a familiarity with hard work.
We're gonna pause there. That last part especially, where it says, for it is well known that exercise by means of habit renders one more ready for struggles. Can you guys apply that in a spiritual manner? Oh, what did I just press? Can you apply that in a spiritual manner?
Oh, you say your daily prayers.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right? Prayers, a Koboskini. Koboskini is a prayer rule. Say the Jesus prayer, preparing yourself for communion. The church, it doesn't stop, unceasingly has always attitudes of preparation. Every motion of the church is about preparation. Now it's preparation for salvation, right? But preparation every aspect, to receive the sacraments, to receive grace, to receive the blessings of our Lord, even in the aspects of liturgical life. I mean, all Holy Week's a type of preparation. I mean, even though it's a road that we walk through, you participate in. It's not, I came for Holy Unction, I came for Palm Sunday, so I'm ready for Holy Friday. It doesn't work that way. It's the cycle of us willingly participating so we can then witness his crucifixion, to be a part of the entombment, and then to be prepared to participate in his glorious third day resurrection. The sacraments, every aspect has it about preparedness, formation, as well as structure. See that? You have, in other words, you have to have it, because if not, I like how I was saying about how the body can become unwielded, how it become beastly and unnatural. In other words, when it's just solely on. And you know what that reminds me of, especially when I think, because in my younger days when I was playing football and we were powerlifting, I would have these friends of mine who had all this enormous upper body, and then they would have what people would make fun of called chicken legs. They would be really built, big muscles, and then just so then that was all their focus, all this pumping of iron, and then you saw the other half. So is that balanced? No. And then sadly, that also brought them maybe that it wasn't sustainable and was kept in that manner, because then one is being weak than the other. And so I think about that as well too, when you think about the importance of the soul and the body, because that's what our Lord calls us to do as well. And I think that's what he's trying to educate the faithful on this, is so that they don't go into the extremes of only focusing on the health and to extremisms of athleticism and obviously weight gain through powerlifting, but to then also to find a balance, because the balance is so that we can be able to handle the struggles. That a human body should be what? At a strength level that there are going to be struggles. What are struggles? Who knows? Struggles could be environmental struggles. Struggles could be hereditary struggles, right? So you say through your lineage, you might be susceptible to bad heart health, or someone in your family had passed away from Parkinson's or something else, diabetes. I think diabetes might be the best one, especially when it runs in the family. Don't they ask you the doctors? Hypertension, but you see, those are modern terms. He's talking in 1892. Did everyone hear what I just said? Not 1992, not 2002, 1892. This should be put like either in Dear Abby or like in a Reader's Digest, so that people can understand how to live a life duality with body and soul. So we're going to pause there, but Jim, you had a point or a question?
It struck me to put this in context. It's 1893. I realize in Greece this was important, and all over Europe it was. By 1896, they were planning the first
Olympics. Good job.
And there was a big movement.
I was thinking about that too.
To have athleticism, body and mind. It was a big intellectual push.
Bravo. I was about to say to him, when the first Olympics were, and I knew it was at the end of the 1800s. Bravo.
These may be peasants, but they were probably talking about this.
Well, did you know, he's at a coastal town on the island of Eviakimi, that they probably have it, yeah. That's a great point. Wow, well, that's an excellent point. So wonderful, wonderful discussion tonight, everyone. God willing, we will meet next week, okay?
Saturday first.
Oh, yeah, let's bring that up. We will meet next week, the 24th. We will not meet because that is Vespers for Ascension, okay? So I'm gonna be going to Analipsi, and I hope everyone can go up there as well too. And then we will meet the 31st. Yeah, so then I think we're gonna finish on the 7th. June 7th will be our last discussion, then we'll take a break for the summer. And then next, going into the fall, I will have another book from St. Nicarius, that's similar to this one in English as well, too, to break down and go from there, to the,
About the 17th,
of what?
this month.
Next week, yeah,
Yeah, we're doing.
No?
yeah.
yes,
Oh,
the
yes.
24th is a no.
Because after that, I won't be here.
Oh, you're leaving us? Where you going, Indiana?
Please,
For how long?
Mom.
Wow, look at you.
My regards to the
Thessaloniki. Yeah, and this Saturday, if anyone's available at 6:30, we're gonna have a presentation. It's called Lethal Nationalism. It's about the genocide of the Greeks in 1913 to 1923. The curator, the person who actually works for the nonprofit who put this together, George Mavropoulos, will be presenting it to us. It's not a very long movie or presentation, about an hour and 15. He will offer some Q&A after as well too. We will have some appetizers and treats and coffee and other things to enjoy as well too. It is free. We just want everyone to come. It'll be a great opportunity to witness it and hear it in our church and understand this important part of our Greek ethnicity and our history as well too. Have a great night, everyone. Christos Anesti.
Alithos Anesti.